I wanted to explain that I had been scared, that I didn't want to burden them with my mistakes, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, tears streaming down my face, feeling the weight of their disappointment. My father finally broke the silence. "You are still our daughter, Amina. We love you, but this is a serious situation." His voice was firm, but I could hear the underlying concern. They began to discuss what would happen next, and I felt like I was watching from a distance, as if I were no longer part of the conversation. They decided that I would stay home from school and that we would visit the village elder for advice. I felt a mix of relief and dread. I was grateful that they were willing to help, but I was terrified of what the elder would say. In our culture, teenage pregnancy was often met with shame and judgment, and I feared the gossip that would follow. The next day, we walked to the elder's hut, my heart heavy with anxiety. The elder was a wise woman, known for her knowledge of the village's traditions and customs. When we arrived, she welcomed us with a warm smile, but I could see the concern in her eyes as she listened to my parents explain my situation. "Amina," she said gently, "you are young, but this is a path you must now walk. You will need support, and it is important to learn from this experience." Her words were kind, but they felt like a heavy burden. I wanted to scream that I didn't want this, that I wanted to go back to being a carefree girl under the baobab tree. The elder advised us to gather the community and share the news. I was terrified at the thought of facing everyone, but my parents insisted it was the right thing to do. They believed that by being open, we could find support and understanding. I felt like I was being thrust into the spotlight, and I wished I could disappear. When the day came, I stood in front of the villagers, my heart racing. My parents spoke first, explaining my situation and asking for their support. I could see the shock on their faces, and I felt the weight of their judgment. When it was my turn to speak, I could barely find my voice. I looked down at the ground, ashamed, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The murmurs in the crowd were like a storm brewing. Some people looked at me with pity, while others whispered harsh words. I felt exposed and vulnerable, and I wanted to run away. But then, something unexpected happened. A few women from the village stepped forward, sharing their own stories of hardship and mistakes. They spoke of their struggles and how they had overcome them. Slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. One woman, Mama Zuri, took my hand and said, "Amina, you are not alone. We will help you." Her words were like a balm to my wounded heart. I realized that while my situation was difficult, I had a community that cared. They offered to help me prepare for the baby and support me through the challenges ahead. As the weeks turned into months, I learned to embrace my new reality. I attended prenatal classes with the other women, and they taught me about motherhood and the strength that comes from community. I began to feel a sense of belonging that I had longed for. My parents, too, became more involved, and we started to communicate better. They listened to my fears and dreams, and I felt their love grow stronger. When the day finally came for me to give birth, I was filled with a mix of excitement and fear. The women of the village gathered around me, offering their support and encouragement. I felt empowered by their presence, and I knew I was not alone. As I held my baby for the first time, I felt a rush of love that I had never experienced before. In that moment, I understood that my life had changed, but it was not the end of my story. I named my daughter Aisha, which means life. She became my motivation to pursue my dreams and to ensure that she would have a better future. I returned to school, determined to finish my education and create a life for us both. My parents were proud of my resilience, and they became my biggest supporters. Through this journey, I learned the importance of communication and the value of community. I realized that my parents' busyness had not been a reflection of their love for me, but rather a struggle to provide for our family. I forgave them for their absence and embraced the lessons I had learned. As I look back on my journey, I see the strength that emerged from my struggles. I became a voice for other young girls in my village, sharing my story and encouraging them to seek help and support. I wanted them to know that they were not alone.
Please subscribe.